Welcome, everyone. I'm Gigi Godwin, President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all here this evening to hear our terrific speaker. We're excited to have our board members, our advisory board, and our invited guests for our speaker presentation. Today's presentation is called Get to Know Our New Comptroller, Brooke Lierman. Some of us are fortunate. We've known her for years, and we are thrilled that she's in this position, and we're excited about working with her. But we are very much looking forward to what she has to say about the historic election and about all of the great things that she's about to do. Juliet is going to read out all the list of attendees so that our comptroller guest speaker knows who has joined us, as well as all of the rest of you. So I want you to be aware of who's with us today as you make your remarks. And I encourage everybody to send your questions to the chat box. That's a very helpful way for us to be sure that your questions are addressed. I want to remind everybody that we are recording and that we will post this on YouTube probably tomorrow, so that you all have access to it. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our Chamber's immediate past chair and chair of our Legislative Affairs Committee, and who also serves as the Director of Government and Community Affairs for Montgomery County and Federal Strategy of Suburban Hospital, Leslie Ford Weber. Over to you, Leslie.
Great, thank you, Gigi. And just a question to Juliet. Do you want to read out our list of attendees now or after, at some point later in the meeting?
I can do it now.
Okay, and then I'll proceed to introduce our comptroller. Thank you, Juliet.
Sounds good. So we from the chamber, we have Brian Levine with the chamber, Megan Floyd with the chamber, Gigi Godwin with the chamber, Andrew Jondu with PNC Bank, Andy Bridge with Eagle Bank, Ann Kademian with USG, Anise Cody with Holy Cross Health, Angela Prentice with APRA, Barbara Ash with the chamber, Mr. Tarandeep Bauer with Integrity Inc., Bill Wishman with Kaiser Permanente. We have Cynthia Riverday with the Rockville Economic Development, Dave Hargadon with TD Bank, Duran Russell, my apologies for that, was PLTP, Dorothy Callahan with the chamber, Ezra Gimida, Gus Ballman with Beverage and Diamond, Gigi Godwin with the chamber, Greg Coleman with Swargate Health, Jermaine Williams with Montgomery College, John Sterhoff with Venable, Jerry Shapiro with Shapiro Inc., Kelly Groff with Visit Montgomery, Leslie Ford Weber with Suburban Hospital, Linda Hauk with ISS, Liz Wacker with JAGW, Mary Kaskowski with the Montgomery County Government, Melissa Childress with MCCC, Michael Leonard with Motorola Solution, Monica Johnson with WSSC Water, Moses Wright, Ray Blanche joined us as well. Sorry, Raymond Sherby, Rolf Laurenberg, Ron Fioravanchitti with USB, and then William Ellis with Pepco.
All right, thank you, Juliet. And while Brooke is a graduate of MCPS, so we know that she is well prepared for any kind of a quiz situation. There will not be a quiz on all those names and organizations today. But I will ask everyone that when you, later on in the conversation, if you ask a question, reintroduce yourself and your company as we move forward. So it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this session. Our mission at the Chamber is to accelerate the success of our members. And so one of the ways that we accelerate your success is to provide the right information at the right time, and especially from the right experts. And that is in that context that we're bringing you this presentation today. Brooke Lierman was elected Comptroller of Maryland, as Gigi mentioned, in a historic election, the first woman to hold this role, statewide office in the state of Maryland, and what was elected in November, and of course sworn in on January 16th. That makes it, I'm told, 5 weeks to the day that you have been in this job. Previous to this role, Ms. Lierman was a civil rights and disability rights attorney and served 2 terms as a state delegate representing the 46th legislative district in the city of Baltimore. When she was in the General Assembly, Ms. Lierman spent 5 years on the Appropriations Committee and then had a leadership role on the Environment and Transportation Committee. She was also the House Chair for the Joint Committee on Pensions, sat on the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness, and founded and formally co-chaired the Maryland Transit Caucus. So very wide-ranging exposure to issues surrounding the state of Maryland, which I'm sure will serve you well in this new role. As comptroller, she's pledged to be an independent voice for Marylanders, ensuring that our taxpayers receive the best value for our tax dollars, preventing waste and fraud, and unlocking opportunities for every Maryland resident, family, and business. So we look forward to hearing more about what that means. So welcome, Madam Comptroller Lierman, and thank you for agreeing to spend time with us today and leading what I'm sure is going to be a robust discussion. We're really pleased to have you here.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much, Leslie, for that great introduction. And thank you, Gigi, as always, for your incredible leadership of the chamber. Thank you, Brian, and everybody who pulled this together. Thank you, Lowell, for all of your leadership as well. It's great to be here. I'm in Annapolis, sadly, not in person with all of you, but it's great to be here virtually with all of you. And yes, as Leslie said, I live in Baltimore. I live in Fells Point with my husband and 2 kids, but I'm a proud Montgomery County School graduate. I'm a 1997 graduate of Walt Whitman High School. Go Vikings. Actually, a little known fact was that Delegate David Moon, and I were classmates. And I think we were the only classmates in the General Assembly during the 8 years that I served in the General Assembly. So I like to joke with Mark Corman and Ariana and everyone that their most important constituent is my mom, who still lives in Bethesda. She is at a Brightview nursing home there. So
before you go one step further, I'm getting a request from Juliet that everybody stop and smile and look in the camera so she can get a good photo.
Sure.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Got it?
Got it, Juliet? I hope so.
Great. Well, yes, and so I have roots in Montgomery County. My brother Kyle and his wife and 3 girls live in Tacoma Park. I know the drive up and down 95 very well. So it's really an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you so much to so many of you who supported me throughout the primary, throughout the general election. It has been a whirlwind 2 years, campaigning around the state. And one of the best parts of it really has been meeting so many people who I might have grown up with their son or daughter or brother or sister, and getting to reconnect in a new way. And certainly learning more about the business community in Montgomery County as well has been really important and really helpful, of course, because when Montgomery County does well, Maryland does well. And so learning about how we can continue creating the opportunity for businesses to start in Montgomery County and stay in Montgomery County and grow and thrive is really exciting. And so I just want to start by saying that my door is always open to you. I am a very accessible person. I look forward to learning, more about the work that you all are doing, the initiatives that you have, your individual businesses, and also as a chamber, and also in your respective business organizations that you're in, and how the comptroller's office can be an advocate for you, can work with you, whether that's, implementing, I passed legislation last year. We'll be doing private letter rulings for businesses. So you can have more tax certainty around what's owed, whether it's making sure you have a contact in our revenue administration division if problems arise, whether you're working on using, you as an individual, or people who are, using the PTE, the pass-through entity, new tax identification or the new tax process that we passed in Maryland several years ago. Or, you're applying for your sales and use tax forms and, you wonder how it works. The other day, somebody said, oh, shoot, there's a typo on mine. Can you help me fix it? And I said, yes, so, whatever it is, we're certainly happy to help. I mean, that's why we're here. We want you to be successful, and we want to work with you. We also want to make sure that there's a level playing field in Maryland, right? So when there are tax evaders, we're going to go after them, because all of you who are paying taxes, you shouldn't be at an unfair disadvantage to those companies who are not. So we are going to, be robust in our compliance efforts, but fair. And my goal at the end of the day is to build an agency that's focused on making our communities and our businesses more equitable, more resilient, and more prosperous. And those are really the three tenets that I am bringing into the Comptroller's office. Now, our three values. The Comptroller's office, I've been giving a lot of talking with our General Assembly committees, having my budget briefings, really talking about sort of the state of the agency, because I think it's important for people to know and understand where we are as an agency in Maryland. What does the Comptroller's office do? Well, the Comptroller is the elected CFO of the state of Maryland, right? We see every dollar in and every dollar out. We are a sister, organization to the Treasurer. We also work closely with Secretary Grady, who is the Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management. But we are an independent, I'm constitutionally elected officer, so we are independent. As the entity that sees every dollar in and every dollar out, we have a number of different divisions and a huge array of work that we do. So I'll just start first by saying, we have a statewide platform, right, where we can talk about and highlight the great work that businesses in Maryland are doing, and the needs that our businesses have. If you've been to our website recently, you will see that it is very old. We would love, and we will be updating this website so that we can do more to talk about the great work that businesses do in Maryland. We can highlight great stories and successes, and we can make the case why other businesses should be here and should stay here as well. So, that's the first role, is that statewide platform is important. Second, the Comptroller sits on a number of very important state boards, right? Including the Board of Public Works, the State Retirement and Pension Board, the 529 Board, been spending a lot of time learning about, and many other boards, the Maryland Council on Economic Education, the Maryland Agricultural Preservation Fund, so many boards. But the Board of Public Works and the State Retirement and Pension Board are two that take up, of course, the most time. On Tuesday, I had my first board meetings. We had 7 hours of Board of Trustee meetings for our pension system. Our pension system serves about 415,000 state retirees. It's almost $65 billion in assets. And so, really making sure that we're thinking through those investments, whenever we can, working with Maryland-based firms, investing in Maryland businesses. These are things that I care a lot about and will be bringing a keen eye to. I was the chair of the Joint Committee on Pensions for the last few years, and we passed, I think, the best climate risk bill in the country last year, requiring that as part of our fiduciary duty, we keep in mind that climate risk is investment risk. So when we are evaluating, and when our investment managers and our chief investment officer, when they are evaluating the risk profile of our portfolio, that they keep take climate risk into account. And we'll be reporting on that, and you'll be able to read more about it in the years ahead. And I mention that because there actually is a national effort underfoot by climate change skeptics to blacklist firms that recognize that climate risk is investment risk, and that's incredibly dangerous to their retirees' benefits. Some of these states have already lost hundreds of millions of dollars in fees paid to non. This is like they're blacklisting places like BlackRock, right? Major investment firms. So we in Maryland are not going that way, and we understand that climate risk is one of the many risks that have to be taken into account when evaluating a portfolio. Then there's, of course, the Board of Public Works. I was just getting my briefing for next Wednesday's Board of Public Works meeting before this call. So, every major contract comes before the Board of Public Works. All outlays of state funding, like program open space, the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Committee, which has an even more complicated acronym than NAME somehow, comes before us quite a lot for funding, as well as all transportation projects, transit work. School construction funding is in a little bit of a different category, but sometimes comes before us as well. So a huge variety of work. And, at my very first Board of Public Works meeting, I sat next to their new governor. It was a pretty surreal experience, but I talked about the values that I bring to that work and the importance of making sure that we are actually reaching our 29% MBE goals, right? That we're really going to do a deep dive on MBE compliance so that we can actually realize those goals and make sure that we're working with our MBEs around the state. I also talked a lot about climate and sustainability and resilience. There are not very many of our agencies that report on the sustainability of their projects. One example though is USM. The University System of Maryland does an excellent job in every item it brings to the board. It notes the sustainability of the project that they're doing. They note whether a building's going to be LEED certified, what other measures they're taking, whether it meets green building certification standards. So it's really, there is more to be done on making sure that when we're approving projects, we're thinking about the long-term costs and not just the short-term costs, right? It might cost $5 million to build today, but if we're building it in a floodplain, so in 10 years, it's going to be flooding every year there, and we're going to have to start outlaying additional, more and more money. It's going to have a higher long-term cost than we want. So really need to be mindful of that. And then, besides boards, I'm also the tax collector. And it's, I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. And they are, some of the few 10-year-olds and 5-year-olds in the state who know what a comptroller is or how to say and spell the word comptroller, but who also care a lot about taxes all of a sudden, right? They're like, oh, taxes, Mom. Whenever they see anything online or there's like an H&R Block or TurboTax commercial, they're like, oh, Mom, it's about taxes. I'm like, yeah, I see. But as the tax collector, my goal, I do not make tax policy. Right? The General Assembly and the governor will be in charge of our tax policy. My job is to make sure that we are having fair and equitable tax administration. That means that we are not over auditing people just because they get the earned income tax credit, right? It means that we're doing the work that needs to be done to spread the word on tax credits like our new senior tax credit. It means that we're getting out there and working with the cash campaign and the VITA programs to provide them the support that they need. And it means that we are helping our businesses to make sure that they understand what needs to be done. That's part of the reason that last year I passed legislation to create a private letter ruling process. We're one of the only states in the nation that does not do private letter rulings right now. So one of the first things I did when after I got elected was write to the incoming governor and ask to include additional spots for lawyers in the office to create a legal division. So we now have a legal division in the comptroller's office. And as of July 1st, we will be able to hire lawyers to start writing private letter rulings for businesses and individuals. And that will just be hugely helpful to so many businesses, attorneys, CPAs, tax attorneys, to have that tax certainty, to know that what you're paying and how you're interpreting our tax laws is actually correct. So you don't have to guess at what you need to pay or at how to interpret something and then be audited and end up spending all this time and money on it. We don't want that. You don't want that. So we're going to do private letter rulings, and they will be published online so that you can understand. We'll de-identify but we'll have the bulk of the ruling online so that you can learn from what else is out there. And I'm really excited to move that along. And that will be a free service. We will not be charging for private letter rulings. So don't abuse it. But everybody is looking forward to doing that because we get so many questions right now, and it's really difficult for us to get back to people on those types of issues. So we're looking forward to hiring. So I want to close. I'm going to spend just 3 minutes on the state of the agency now. And I bring this up because I think it's going from the lawyers is a good way to pivot. The starting salary for a lawyer at the comptroller's office is $57,000. That's a joke. I mean, it's insane. I mean, it's incredible. You cannot hire tax attorneys for $57,000 a year, and they're worth more than that, right? And so I mention that because we, as my 3 initiatives, 1 is improving the employee experience, 2 is modernizing the agency, and 3 is reimagining the impact of the office. And that first one, improving the employee experience, means really rebuilding our workforce and making sure that we can pay people a lot closer to what they're worth, so that we can bring the staff in that we need to do the work that needs to be done. If we cannot hire and retain high quality, smart, sharp, focused people in the comptroller's office, it's not bad. It's not just bad for us, it's bad for you, right? It's bad for all of us as a state, because it means we don't have the best people, making sure that the revenue is collected. We don't have the best people looking out on doing fraud detection, right? We need really good people in the comptroller's office to do this really important work. And so we are working with the governor and DBM to make sure that we can reclassify many of our positions so that we can pay people, we can recruit people, we can pay them, and we can keep them. That's so much of what I'll be focusing on in the coming year. I mean, I'll say just, besides paying people, it's offering them a great work environment. Buildings are old. The building I'm in right now was built in the 1950s. The bathrooms are original to the building, right? There's basic stuff that we need to do to upgrade. Two, the second one I'll go to is modernizing. So our agency systems are old. The first thing I did when I took office was to sign a contract to do a security assessment and to sign contracts to bring in more cybersecurity protections for the agencies 24/7. So I'm grateful that we could do that, and look forward to learning more so that we can further protect the agency. But we are an agency right now that operates on a mainframe system. Our tax processing is all done through a DOS-based system. We have employees sitting on green screens and they have no CRM, no customer relation management software. So it's really challenging to track what people need when they call, when they email, who they are. We have none of that right now. We are in the process. We have a vendor. We will be moving our tax payment and our tax processing system to a new system over the next few years, but it will take a few years to do all of this because of these so many interfaces and the complexity of it. But that is something we are committed to. I am working with our Chief Deputy Comptroller, Andy Schoffel, to make sure it gets done. And of course, our new Chief of Staff, Rihanna Matthews-Brown. The other thing I'll mention is our accounting system. So we have a legacy accounting system. The comptroller is also the general accountant for the state of Maryland. We do all payroll processing for the state and all accounting. We publish our ACFR every year. So our accounting system is a legacy system. Like I said, it is on a mainframe. It doesn't use DOS though, it uses COBOL. And so as its language. So we are also working in concert with the Department of Budget and Management and the Treasurer. We will be procuring a new system to update our accounting, and that matters. Of course, it matters to all the state agencies, but it will also matter and be hugely helpful for vendors and for contractors and for businesses and nonprofits doing work and getting money from the state of Maryland, because we'll be able to track all of that so much more easily, and you'll be able to see where your money is, and it will be much more nimble. So that will come as well. But again, this is a big project that will take some time. So finally, I'll just say we are working to reimagine the impact that this office can have. And much of that is dependent on you. We want to work to close the tax gap. We want to make sure our procurement system is working for businesses in Maryland, but we also want to be able to support you in whatever way you need to be supported. So please keep in touch with us. Make sure that, I'll put my contact information in the chat. And I just look forward to making sure that we can work together to really reach the full potential of Montgomery County and of the state of Maryland. So thanks so much for having me, and I'm happy to take a few questions. Thank you.
Wow. After all, you have taken on a huge, huge job. So I understand, you had some exposure to it as a member of the General Assembly. So perhaps after 5 weeks, what were the things that you expected? You knew about the mainframe, you knew what was going, and then what's been a surprise, as you've gotten into the job?
Good question. So I think one of the things that has been incredibly helpful coming in as a former appropriator, and I not just legislator, but as a former appropriator and member of the Appropriations Committee, is my understanding of the budget process, right? I understand, how the budget process works. the Comptroller's Office produces incredibly important reports that actually form the foundation for our entire budget. So all of our disparity grants, all our education formula, the Comptroller produces the reports that inform all of that, our net taxable income reports that we report by county. So I think the good thing has been like having that background has been incredibly helpful. And I don't think I would have predicted how helpful it could be. You know, I can go online and like pull different agencies' budget analyses because I know where they are and I know how to read them and I know what they say, right? I testified to the budget here to our budget committees over the past week in the House and the Senate. I'd been on the other side of the table for years. And now, you know, so I know when DLS is giving its report, you know, what they're going to say. And I have a ton of respect for the Department of Legislative Services who does these budget analyses. So I think, you know, I could not have guessed how helpful it would be to be a former member of the Appropriations Committee. Although it's funny, Peter was on the Appropriations Committee too. We actually were on the same subcommittee as well. So, you know, there's something about the Transportation and Environment Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, which Mark Corman now chairs. So I think, you know, I'm surprised at how truly helpful it is. I am also surprised. I have learned a lot about hiring and, you know, the difficulties and the need to really help the state streamline its hiring process. I've also learned I've learned a lot about what it is to be a state employee, right? And how it is to hire state employees and what we need to do to make it easier to hire good people and then to retain them. We did an employee survey in the Comptroller's Office. We had a 70% response rate, which is incredibly high. We have over 1,000 employees. And so we're digging into that information now, but it's, you know, people want to be paid what they're worth. People want access to better parking, right? They want to be able to park near where they work instead of a shuttle ride away. They want access to training. So many people are like, we love this job, but we want to learn more. Like, we don't want to just learn what we are supposed to do. We want to learn about taxes writ large, or about how to start a small business, or more financial literacy work, or how to be better managers, right? So I'm learning so much about the state's hiring system too, which I don't know if that sounds very exciting, but it's really important, right? I mean, if we don't have great people, and a lot of them, I mean, without the right people on the staff, you know, your permits don't get pulled as quickly, right? You don't get good responses to your tax questions. Things don't work, right? And so it's just really important that we have good people in these offices, and it's been fun working on that with folks. I've also learned a lot about tax filings. We've got about, I think, over 650,000 tax filings or tax returns filed to date. Tax deadline this year is April 18th. So don't be slow, file that tax return.
Well, that was actually one of the questions we wanted to talk with you about. I mean, certainly there's been a lot of attention in the national press about vacancies at the IRS and the impact that has on individual taxes. And you've mentioned the difficulties in hiring and retaining at the state. So give us, you know, right, are you ready? Is the office ready for tax filing system in Maryland? And what should people expect in terms of timely responses?
Sure. You know, we still, despite our understaffing, send refunds back more quickly than almost any other revenue agency in the nation today. And it's because it's been a huge priority. It was a big priority of the previous comptroller. It's a priority for me, especially for folks who are filing their tax returns early. Generally, those, not always, but generally those are lower wealth individuals who are really counting on and waiting for that refund. And so it's really important that we get them that money quickly. Right? I mean, that could be they're just waiting on it to make a down payment, waiting on it to fix their car, you know, waiting on it to try to put down a down payment for tuition at, you know, University of the Shady Grove or wherever, right? So it's really important that we are able to get that money back to them as quickly as possible. But I will say, you know, look, there's a downstream that our systems and our divisions, how the Comptroller's Office set up is, you know, we have a revenue administration division, we have a fraud detection division, we have a taxpayer services division, we have compliance. So, you know, the tax return comes in, goes through revenue administration, goes to fraud detection, then back to revenue administration, refund gets sent out. If something goes badly in fraud detection or revenue administration, and the tax refund doesn't come out, we start getting calls. That's where taxpayer services comes in, right? And so we have 2 call centers, one in Baltimore, one in Annapolis, where we're taking calls 8:30 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, every day, all through tax season, answering emails, tax help at marylandtaxes.gov, hundreds of emails. So my goal is, and then if things go really badly and, people don't pay, it goes to compliance, right? So my goal is to really make it so that we don't need as robust a taxpayer services division, right? We want to make sure that things can be handled upfront and online as much as possible in the revenue administration and fraud detection space. And that's why this big IT project, bringing in the new tax processing system, is so important. Because I want you to have a portal where you can log in and see where payments are and understand payments you've made to the state, fees that you've been assessed, fees that we've waived, interest owed. I want businesses and individuals to be able to see all of that much more clearly. And this won't replace iFile or BFile, but it will be integrated into it. So that it's more clear. So I think so much of what I really want to focus on is making sure that we are building a system where we aren't sort of making people call in and sit on hold or email in and wonder when they're going to hear from somebody. So as much as possible, we want it to be fixed and ready to go on the front end. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I am scanning the screens right now just to make sure that I don't see any hands raised, because I keep going. I'm enjoying this and I've got a whole list. But please raise your hand and put a question in the chat. One of the things that, as I'm looking for this there, is that there are various groups, of course, that look at business climate issues and tax issues around the nation. And one of them, the Tax Foundation, ranked Maryland 46th among the states for its business tax climate. So what role do you think the Comptroller's Office plays in ensuring that Maryland is viewed as a good place to do business?
Sure. Well, sometimes what I think we really need to focus on in Maryland is the value. Like, what are you getting for what you're paying? And so one of my goals is to make sure that, I'm not in the General Assembly, I'm not the governor, I'm not doing tax rates or tax policy, but my goal is to make sure that people feel like when they're interacting with our office, when they're doing whether it's getting that private letter ruling or, working with our taxpayer services or our ombudsman or me or one of the deputy comptrollers, that they feel like they're getting the service that they deserve for the taxes that are being paid, right? That we are a customer service agency, a constituent service agency. And I want to make sure that people feel like they've had a really positive experience working with us. I can't, a couple of people have said to me, they're like, oh, I didn't mind. It was fun making my check out to you this year, like getting it. I was like, you're right, it's going to fade. That joy will fade. And I did get somebody mailed in. We processed 3.3 million tax returns last year. Half of them have to be touched by hand and almost 10% are still paper. So we got a paper tax return this year in an envelope that said Comptroller of Maryland, and then in parentheses it said, who is a woman, yay, which was pretty funny. But look, I think there's a serious conversation to be had about the tax climate of Maryland, but I think in the Comptroller's Office, what we need to focus on is making sure that we can give data on tax burdens to the General Assembly and Governor, so they're informed about what people are paying and they understand who our different taxes are affecting and where the revenue is coming from the state as well, so people will understand that. I actually have a chart right here that is one of my favorite charts. It's really interesting. The top 0.01% in Maryland in 2020, in tax year 2021, was 280 households, and they paid their share of the total net Maryland income tax was almost 5.5%, 280 families. And the income tax is the bulk of the revenue that we make. It's sales tax, fees and federal money, of course, but also income tax is huge. So those 280 families have a very outsized effect on our income as a state. And yet we can't predict. 280 families do not, they don't follow trend lines of how people spend their money. So it's hard for us to predict sometimes with certainty the income that's going to come in, which is interesting as well. Sorry, that was sort of off topic, but just an
No,
interesting
no.
fact.
Not at all. It's been a conversation in Montgomery County, certainly over the years when the tax rates changed and what impact did that have on as you say, those handful or couple handfuls of organizations and individuals that have an outsized influence on tax revenues.
Yep.
I see a hand raised. Barbara, our colleague.
Hi, well, it's just truly a pleasure to meet you. I am Barbara Ash. I'm the Executive Vice President at the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. And my question is that we are often asked to weigh in on economic development initiatives. And it is always helpful to know, because we've been talking in particular about pay and taxes and
Yep.
quality of life. And we used to know, and I don't know where that data comes from, but you mentioned you do a lot of the analysis around taxes. It would be helpful to know, what does an individual have to make in the state of Maryland to pay for their services? So as we're looking at, jobs in particular, what jobs contribute to that versus they make enough to give back.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of those do we need?
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. That would be an interesting report to sort of dive into.
And we used to get that years ago. I've been at the chamber now 20 years, and we used to get that, I'd say like 10 years ago, Gigi, something.
We knew it at the county level, and the number, I'm almost afraid to say out loud, was like I don't know,
58,
50,000,
60,000
50, 60,000. And that was forever ago.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and we knew, because why this was an issue is we were concerned about the discussion, the conversation about what kind of jobs we're trying to attract and
Right.
retain. I was like, well, that's great, but if you were focused on low-paying jobs as your big economic development strategy, then
Right.
how does government survive that situation? That seemed contrary to growing the economy. And so that's, I mean, Barbara and I talked a lot about this, but there was such a number. We knew it in the county. It was I'm going to say 50, 60 something. And that was a decade ago.
Right. Right. So really different now. Yeah. That's interesting. No, it's definitely something to think about looking into and reporting on. That is an interesting issue. And I'll drop in the chat here our income tax summary from tax year 2021, in case folks are interested in digging into it. We need a new website, but if you do go to our website, which is marylandtaxes.gov, we also need a new URL. If you scroll down a little, you'll see that there's a tab for reports, and we have reports on fiscal year end, general revenues, annual reports, general fund revenue based on income, alcohol, tobacco, motor fuel, sales and use tax, A&A, inheritance. So you can see some of the breakdown of the different types of taxes and the different areas of revenue that come in. I will also say that one of the things that I would love to do is to have more of sort of a data page on our website, to have, I don't know, in Baltimore, there used to be CityStat, you have sort of CompStat, right? And to have data that could be, nimble and manipulated and run reports so that people could understand and see where our data was, and make more of it publicly available in a way that's more accessible to people. A lot of nonprofit leaders have said that this would be really helpful for them when they're doing grant requests, for instance, and doing grant writing, if they're trying to, write a grant and demonstrate the need in a certain county or certain area or certain zip code, that having that data readily available would be helpful, so they don't have to ask us for it. And it's just helpful and interesting to make the case to, I think, different employers and other places as well. So we're talking about how that would work and what it would look like in a new revamped website. But thanks, Barbara. That was interesting. Yeah,
I actually have a related question.
I just
Go
wanted
ahead,
to follow
Barbara,
up
go
on
ahead.
that real quickly. You mentioned about that data point and a grant. So I just completed a grant for the state of Maryland. I run a nonprofit, and the Chamber's Foundation has a foundation that helps veterans and trying to measure the economic impact, because it's created over 6,000 jobs in the state.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know, and trying to get a sense of what is the force multiplier there, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that helps us evaluate. It helps you evaluate grant applications and, understanding how it plays out. So I'm thrilled that you also are driven by data. So are we
Yeah.
at the chamber.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yes.
thank you. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we're
Liz?
pretty proud of the fact we have driven that much job creation in the state of Maryland through
Yeah.
our Veteran Institute for Procurement program, which I
Oh, the
know
veterans
Curtis-
program is really phenomenal and so interesting, like such a national model, for other areas. It's, yeah, no, it's phenomenal.
And of
Yeah.
course, what we found also very interesting, I was really thrilled when the governor proposed legislation to give veterans
Yeah.
an income tax break. I'm
The income. Yeah.
anxious to hear your
Mhm.
reaction to that because I thought, well, good start. Then maybe we can keep retirees, federal retirees,
Yeah.
maybe let's keep a good thing going. And then,
Yep.
because one of the big issues you're talking about talent, attraction and retention, but we have a lot of people who made money, and wouldn't it be good to retain those discretionary spenders who also
Yep.
give back to the community like veterans do?
Yep.
And so I'm, wondering what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And absolutely, I sort of joked on the campaign trail. I don't know that we'll ever be able to compete with Florida. That's just not who we are. But certainly, we should be competing with Delaware, with Pennsylvania, with West Virginia, to make sure people understand, look, we're a higher cost state. We're a higher income state than some of our surrounding states. We need to make the case that we have the benefits, that there's a benefit to staying here, besides your grandchildren. And we need to make it easier for people to stay here. I think we also need to make sure that people understand there are differing tax structures, right? You pay taxes in a different way in Pennsylvania on different things and different items than you do in Maryland. So I think, there's work to be done to make sure that it's more transparent and clear, and that we are looking at exemptions for additional retirement dollars as well.
Thank you.
Hello.
Liz had her hand up.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Liz Wagger. I'm with JAGW, actually stands for Junior Achievement of Greater
Oh.
Washington.
Nice.
And listening to so much here as a nonprofit in Maryland and in Montgomery County, we're kind of sitting at, you're talking about taxes and tax revenue, and all that tax revenue supports the state, supports the school system, supports education. We're sitting here with business people, business owners, Chamber of Commerce, Maryland, businesses pay taxes. And of course, the state supports businesses. And of course, businesses support nonprofits. And so many nonprofits in Montgomery County, I'm thinking of like WorkSource Montgomery, I'm thinking of all the food banks and houses of worship that support people in the community. And of course, Junior Achievement of Greater Washington and our work with financial literacy. We also depend on the business community to support our work to help the residents in the state. So as I sit here in an interesting place, it's just been a really good conversation hearing you talk about the importance of tax revenue and using taxes to the most efficient way. And I just appreciate the conversation very much. So thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. And thank you for your work. I worked very closely with Junior Achievement of Central Maryland and their team. We got them bond funding so they could build, what's it called? The big center?
Finance Park.
Yes, Finance Park.
Finance Park.
I was like on the tip of my, so they built a nice finance park in Baltimore County. And it's really exciting. And so I'm very excited to work on financial literacy work. I was actually just, we were talking with some other state leaders today about how we could sort of center some of the financial literacy work out of the comptroller agency, so that we can, sort of bring the sort of financial, wherewithal, but also because I'm on the board of the Maryland Council on Economic Education, which is like the Train the Trainer program for the state, that we should be working together to, connect with senior centers, fraternities, sororities, nonprofit organizations, schools, to really think about how can we stand up and make some of these resources available. So would be delighted at any point to chat with you about your ideas and the ecosystem out there, so that we can do more. Yep. Thanks, Liz. Yeah.
Anne.
Madam President.
Muted. Hi, Brooke. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. This is fantastic. And
Of course.
I want to ask a slightly different question. So
Mhm.
you've talked about your priorities for the changes you want to make in the agency, and valuing the worker experience and these things. I'm wondering if you could talk about how you're approaching culture change, because it is a massive culture change, both the organization itself, but also the incredibly refreshing perspective that you're bringing, which is going from thinking about the administration to the policy impact of how you do that work in such a creative and important way. How are you thinking about that culture change? Is it more like, let's just do it and get it done? Or are you thinking about the culture change itself, and is there a strategy around that?
That's great. I have this little picture on my wall that says, we have a strategy. It's called getting things done. But no, it's a very fair question. So one of the first things that we did was create a new position in the office called the Chief Equity and Transformation Officer. CEDO. And we hired a wonderful person, the former chief of staff for County Executive Stuart Pittman. And she is leading our efforts on that culture change internally, really making sure that we are bringing an equity lens to everything that we're doing, that we're focusing on making sure that people feel heard, that they feel valued, and that they are in fact valued and contributing in whatever way makes the best sense. Because I think so many people in the agency, because it's a large agency, they sometimes don't know what everybody else is doing. They don't necessarily feel included in the mission of the agency, and we want people to understand that they are, and everybody is essential here. We do not have people to waste. So we also created a new leadership structure in the agency. So there used to be one deputy comptroller who had like 20 direct reports, and it wasn't, I don't think it was a functional way. It didn't work for what I wanted to do. So we created 4 deputy comptrollers, and each deputy comptroller has a certain number of divisions that report up to the deputy comptroller. It's a diverse team of deputy comptrollers with different lived experiences and different professional experiences. One of them actually used to be an economic development consultant, Montgomery County, Ben Siegel. And then we also have Andy Schaffel, Rachel Sessa, and Dr. Valerie Sanders. And we are creating, as I mentioned, the first CIO ever, and now we have the first chief equity officer. So we're really thinking in terms of accountability, transparency, and inclusivity in the office as well. I think externally, it's really, we're trying to build a team that can focus on how we can not just be reactive, but how we can be proactive. So for instance, our taxpayer services division is entirely reactive, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way. Somebody needs to be there when the phone is ringing, right? We need people to answer the phones and answer the emails, but that is reacting to a need, right? We need to also do work to be proactive, to go out to communities around the state of Maryland, to let them know the resources that we have in the office, to amplify those resources, and actually to build the resources that we have and the people in the office who can be helpful to businesses and nonprofits and whatnot. So we have to build up that team in the office as well to be more proactive. So shocking news, we are asking for more positions in the governor's supplemental budget. But this is an agency, we have lost positions over the past 5 years. We're actually about 40 positions, not including the ATC, the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. We're almost 40 positions down over the last 4 years. And so we need to build back up, because tax laws aren't getting simpler, right? So they're getting more complicated in many ways. So we need more people to be able to be here to do it and to build that proactive team. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. That was terrific. Sure. Thanks.
Yeah. And I just wanted to repeat, I put my my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me. So I have your contact information. It's funny, I was looking through your leadership on the chamber. And, I think sometimes I grew up in Montgomery County, although I grew up an Orioles fan. So I was in Baltimore a lot during Orioles season. But I think sometimes we think of sort of Baltimore and Montgomery County as very separate entities, but it's interesting looking at the employers that many of you work for, and they're Baltimore and Montgomery County, right? Whether it's Hopkins or PNC or M&T or I think I saw Cone Resnick on there, right? Yep. So it's, you know, I just try to always remind people, like, we are one state, and there's so much that we can do to build each other up, which is really exciting.
Which is
So,
also why we use an expression. It's not only are we one Maryland, but we also use the expression Metro Maryland, because between here and Baltimore are, you know, more than 80% of the state's population, and at least that percentage, if not higher, in its assets, with Hopkins, with University of Maryland, with NIH, with all those forts and, you know, all of that, with a port, with an airport. I mean, it goes, the list goes on, and it's an hour's drive. I mean, it is geographically a small area, but at one point we had an economist do a study, and looking at just that stretch from Montgomery County and Frederick, just like a windshield wiper going over, it was the 8th largest basically economic area in the United States. And we don't describe it that way. We allow ourselves to be bifurcated as Baltimore somehow over there, and we're a suburb of Northern Virginia, which just about kills me when I hear things like that. And so I don't ever call this place I live suburban Maryland. Never. I call it Metro Maryland, because I see us, and it's in Maryland's best interest to talk about ourselves as the 8th largest. And the reason for that is that it would give us greater standing when we're going after federal money or anything else. And of course, that brings my mind right to DARPA, and it brings my head right to FBI and a bunch of other things that we want to get here in Maryland, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, and certainly your experience on the Transportation and the Environment Committee gives an appreciation to that. You know, I've heard people talk about that stretch of I-95 as the longest 40 miles in the United States that separates our communities.
But when they finished the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, the oldest Amtrak tunnel in the nation, which is a terrible distinction, and I cannot believe it took Amtrak this long to get it together. But now it is under, you know, it is moving forward. The PLA is signed. I was at the announcement 2 weeks ago. It's going to take a while, but when that tunnel is done, this is going to be like a 30-minute from Penn Station to Union Station, a 30-minute MARC ride. I mean, it's going to be fast. For $8, it's a pretty good deal.
Well, now that you have raised the issue of speeding transportation and congestion, we have to ask. You know, you've mentioned already.
Answers don't change.
You're on the Board of Public Works. Certainly, one of the projects that is keenly of interest to those of us in the southern end of Metro Maryland is the American Legion Bridge and the project, which again at some point will come back to the BPW. So you've been described as a skeptic of former Governor Hogan's plan on that project.
That would be accurate. That would be an accurate description.
So what's your current thinking on the project and where we go to truly make some improvements?
No, I mean, I think I can still be described as a skeptic for many reasons. One, you know, I'm skeptical that this is a good deal for Marylanders. A 50-year, I'm not against P3s. I actually think P3s are a really good solution for a lot of construction projects. But a 50-year deal with a contractor that doesn't have the best record, I think is I have real concerns about this deal and about its value to the people of Maryland and how much we're going to be paying over the long term, and how much, you know, drivers will be paying, frankly. So I have real concerns about doing a P3 that's a 50-year P3. I think, you know, we can look no further than the Purple Line to see what can go dramatically wrong with a long-term P3, right? I mean, this is you know, I think we need to come into major P3s with a skeptical eye, because at the end of the day, the companies who are coming in are not accountable to us. They are accountable to their shareholders. And so we do not have aligned interests all the time. I'm a lawyer, I'm a litigator. I, you know, sued many people in my day. And yet when you are the state and all you have as recourse is to sue a contractor who walks off a deal, that is not enough, right? It's you know, it's a bad deal if that's all you're left with is to bring a lawsuit against somebody and there's cones in people's yards and half a street dug up and half a bridge created. You know, it's a terrible place to be. So I'm very skeptical of this long-term P3 and whether it's a good use of our dollars. And two, I think I'm really skeptical that it will actually relieve traffic. I will say, my family used to have a house in Virginia on Lake Anna. It's where a little cabin I grew up going to. We sold it. And part of the reason we sold it was because the traffic in Northern Virginia is so bad. And I don't mean 10 years ago, Northern Virginia. I mean like 3 years ago, Northern Virginia, right? Post hot lanes, right? So I am very, very skeptical that this will actually bring the relief that Marylanders deserve. And I sit in this traffic, I see it, I think there's many reasons for it, but I look forward to working with Paul Wiedefeld, understanding his ideas and his plans, look forward to working with Governor Moore. I'm not the Secretary of Transportation, I have to sort of be an independent advocate and really bring, my wherewithal to looking at the project, and I will absolutely do that. I also think we have to be mindful of the challenges getting between Frederick and Montgomery County, right? It's not just about getting to Northern Virginia, it's also about getting to Frederick, and how we can provide relief to folks who are working in Montgomery County but live in Frederick. And I think we also have to make sure that we're keeping an eye there too, because that can be a pretty brutal commute. And there are very clear bottlenecks along 270 that could easily be fixed. I mean, not easily, but they can be fixed, right? We can do that work to decrease those bottlenecks along 270 in a traditional, procurement format. And if we'd done that over the past 8 years, we would have made real progress. And so I feel like it's unfortunate that we didn't. So look forward to meeting with Paul Wiedefeld. Look, I always keep an open mind and, change my mind when new evidence is presented, but look forward to meeting with him and learning more about their plans.
Well, actually, our board has a meeting scheduled with the new secretary in April. Gigi, is that right? We were talking
Yes,
about it
April
earlier.
27th, as a matter of fact. So perfect. This is a perfect setup so that we can continue that conversation.
Yep. Perfect.
I noticed that we are coming to the end of our time. I just want to do a scan here. Let me go to the second screen. Any hands raised? Any other comments going on?
Great to see you all, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's been such a pleasure, really, to hear from you, to hear. You have a huge task in front of you, but certainly bringing fresh eyes to things and the background and the perspective that you had from having been so close to its operations over the last few years as well. We wish you all the very best. Thank you for being so transparent and putting all your information in the chat so that people can get in touch with you. We wish you a smooth tax season all the way through to the end of it, and good luck filling all those positions.
Thank
Gigi,
you.
I'll let you close it out.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. We're so excited to have you, our new comptroller. You've made history. Your very election was historic and so important to so many of us. So we congratulate you again on behalf of the chamber and our community. So we're excited about that. We've always enjoyed working with you, and we're looking forward to facing the challenges ahead together. So please accept our deepest appreciation. And please know that you can count on us as a trusted source. We have great resources, access to information, trusted thought leaders, subject matter experts. We're here to help. We do well when our state does well, and we want you to be successful. So here we are. And again, we want to thank you for spending your evening with us. I want to thank everybody on the call, our board of directors, our advisory board, our guests that joined us. Thank you for spending your time with us. Your time is valuable, and we appreciate you joining us this evening. And so with that, I'm going to thank everybody, and I will remind everybody on the call that we do have our broadcast for the Public Safety Awards on Wednesday, March 8th, and our annual dinner on June 8th. And of course, we're hoping the comptroller will join us. That
Put it
as
on my
well.
calendar now.
Oh, it better be on your calendar, right? We're gonna
Yeah.
double check that. And with that, I want to say thank you and good night to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.